Okay, so today I will talk about lifting recollements of abelian categories, and we will use model structures for this. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So this is joint work with Georgios Dalezios, and there should be a paper on arXiv soon. Yeah, and let me start with some motivation and some preliminaries. So let's first see what is a recollement of derived categories over rings. So this is a diagram of this form. So you have 6 functors and these 3 triangulate categories, and the conditions are that you have on the right-hand side an adjoint triple, on the left-hand side also an adjoint triple, and LRI is fully faithful, and you ask the image of I to be the kernel of E. Okay, so in other words, you can only think that, okay, this is a situation where you have an adjunction on the right-hand side, and this guy here, or this guy here is fully faithful, and you just take the kernel, and then kernel coincides with this category. Okay, so, I mean, there are several, I mean, there is the obvious question why we are interested in recollements of derived categories of rings, or why we want to construct such diagrams. So one answer is that, of course, most of the homological invariants that we are working are formulated in the setup of derived categories. And using recollements, we can compute these invariants along the recollement that we have. And the typical example is a recent result by Angeleri, Kooning, Liu, and Yang, where they proved that in a recollement of derived categories of rings, the global dimension of the middle ring is finite if and only if the global dimension of S and T is finite. Okay, so one particular source of such examples of recollements of derived categories of rings are recollements of derived module categories that you can lift them to the derived categories. Okay, so this is the following example. So you have a ring with an idempotent element, and then you always have this diagram here. This is a recollement now of module categories. The definition remains the same. So you have again this joint triple on the right-hand side. This L or R is fully faithful, and this I is again fully faithful. And of course, the kernel of E are all modules annihilated by E, which is this module category. Okay, and whenever when you know that the ideal is stratifying, the ideal generated by E is stratifying, and this precisely means that this function is homologically bending, and this means that the x here are the same. Then you can immediately derive this diagram and get this picture on the bottom of the slide. Now the point is that you can derive the right-hand side with no conditions, but to show that on the left-hand side you get the derived category of this ring, you want this assumption. Okay. So the aim of this talk is to try to understand this type of phenomenon in recollements of general abelian categories using Quillen model structures. Okay, so let me briefly recall what will be the definition for today for an abelian model structure. So we have this correspondence by Huve, where abelian model structures on an abelian category which is complete and co-complete correspond with full subcategories, such that these 2 pairs are complete cotorsion pairs and W is thick. Okay, so for us, this will be the definition that an abelian model structure A consists of 3 full subcategories with these 2 properties. Okay, so a cotorsion pair means that these 2 subcategories are X1 orthogonal. Okay, and for all objects, you can find this 2 short exact sequence, right, where X is in curly X and Y is in curly Y, and similar going to the right. Okay. Now, I mean, what is good? What you can do when you have an abelian model structure on an abelian category, you can build the homotopy category. Okay, so when you have an abelian category, and now we call this subcategories, we call it Huve triple, then you can localize A with respect to the weak equivalence and get the homotopy category. Okay, And now, if you work with hereditary abelian model categories, this hereditary means that in this contortion pair that you have, you don't have higher x from 1 between the objects of the contortion pair. And then we know by Gillespie that this homotopy category is a stable Frobenius category. So it's this intersection where you kill all these objects. And then we know by Happel, right, that this stable Frobenius category is triangulated. So you get a natural triangulated structure on the homotopy category. Okay. So as I said before, right, so the aim is to use this language, use this machinery, and present a method to lift recollements of hereditary abelian model categories to their associated homotopy categories. So the first say question problem is how we can transfer models. So what I mean is that if you have an adjunction between abelian categories and you start with a Hoover triple, say in B, you would like to be able to transfer this data on the left-hand side on A. Okay, and what's natural to do is to take, so this, I didn't say it before, this object we call it fibrant. We take the fibrant objects in A to be the inverse image of fibrants in B, take the trivial objects in A to be the inverse image of the trivial objects in B, and now take the external orthogonal of these two classes. Okay, and we make the following definition that if you can, if this data is a Hoover triple, then we say that the right lifted abelian model structure along this adjunction exists on this abelian category A. Okay. And now our first result with Georgios is that we have some, say, natural homotopical or homological condition where this is the case. So consider the adjunction as before. And now we are working over crothotic categories. And we assume the following three conditions. So the first condition says that this functor maps cofibrations in B to monomorphism. Okay, so this functor Q is a left adjoint, right? So in general, it's only right exact. So this says that it preserves a kind of exact sequence that we would like to be preserved. Then we ask this contortion pairs to be generated by a set. And then we ask for this, what we call right acyclistic condition. And then we show that this, what we defined before, this triple of subcategories in A, it gives us a Hoover triple in A, and it is hereditary if the Hoover triple that we start in B is also hereditary. Okay, so under these three conditions, we can transfer the model from B to A. And here comes an example. So consider a ring epimorphism and assume that R is Gorenstein, it's a Gorenstein ring. And moreover, S is, as a module over S, has finite projective dimension as a left and right module. Then we have the abelian model structure where the cofibrants are the Gorenstein projectives or Cohen-Macaulay. Then the trivial are the modules of finite projective dimension. And the fibrants are all modules. And this model structure is called projective because the fibrants are all objects. Okay. Then Then we have this adjoint triple coming from the ring epimorphism, right? And then we can show that that the conditions that I showed you before, they are true, and we can get an adjoint triple now between the homotopy categories. Now the interesting thing is that on the right-hand side, the homotopy category of the model that we put in mod R, it gives us, of course, the stable category of Gorenstein projectives. But on the left-hand side, you don't get the stable category of Gorenstein project over S. You get some other triangulate category. Okay. Okay. So this was the first result, how we can transfer the model. And now let me just explain that. So if you start now with the recollement of crothotic categories, so the definition remains the same. Just think the diagram ABC of abelian categories. This is a short exact sequence, and think that both I and E, they have a left and right adjoint. Okay. And now put two models in B, one projective, so the fibrants are all B, and one injective, and we ask to be Quillen equivalent. Do the same in C. You ask the functor E to preserve trivial objects, and moreover, you ask that this left transfer that I explained and the right transfer that I didn't explain exists along the functor I. Okay, so we put two models on B, two models on C. We ask about this condition on E, on trivial objects, and we ask that we are able to make the transfer. Okay, then the second result is the following, that so under the above setup, you always have this Recollement diagram. Sorry, you always have this diagram. So you get an adjoint triple here and an adjoint triple here, but this diagram is a Recollement if and only if this functor I from A to B is what we call derived embedding, and this means exactly that you get you have a Quillen adjunction, and the functor I induces a functor between the homotopy categories of the transfer model and of the projective model, and you ask to be fully faithful. And then you also ask that for all cofibrant objects that belong to the kernel, the unit map is a weak equivalence. Okay, so here in the remark, I write that, okay, this homotopy category is the common homotopy category of the right and left transfer model. Okay, and these conditions are exactly the conditions. So just a small comment. You have this adjoint triple on the right-hand side, and you just take the kernel. Okay, so this is the first condition, and you get the functor from this homotopy category to the kernel. So the first condition says that this functor is fully faithful, and the second condition says that this functor between the homotopy and the kernel is essentially surjective. So then putting all this data in a Recollement of cross-threaded categories, so you can put the model and then lift the diagram to the associated homotopy categories. And as a last example, right? I have 1 minute, right? And so consider a triangular matrix ring where A and B are Ivanaga Gorenstein, and assume M that has finite projective dimension over A and over B. And now consider, as before, the Gorenstein projective model on R and the Gorenstein injective model on R, and the same also on A. And then we can use the previous theorem to get this Recollement, where here is the homotopy category, this homotopy category will give you the Gorenstein projectives, the stable category of Gorenstein projects over A. Here you will also get the Gorenstein projects over R, and in this case, the transfer model that we get on B, in this case, is again the stable category of Gorenstein projects over B. Okay. Yeah, I think that's all. It was really a flash talk. Thank you very much.